Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Several European leaders have arrived in London for a Ukraine security meet hosted by British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer at Lancaster House. The attendees list includes French President Emmanuel Macron, Italian Giorgio Meloni, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Also joining them is Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, among others. The meeting comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrived in the UK, followed by his disappointed departure from the United States. Starmer said that there has been an agreement made that the UK, along with France and possibly one or two others, will work with Kyiv to stop the war. Starmer says he trusts US President Donald Trump's conviction for a Ukraine peace deal. Meanwhile, just a few hundred metres from where the summit is taking place, a group of pro-Ukrainian demonstrators wanted to show their support for the country. Joining us to discuss this topic, we're first joined by Marian Duris, who is a foreign affairs expert, joining us from Brussels. We also have Professor Alexei Haran, who is a professor of comparative politics at the University of Kyiv Molia in Kyiv, Ukraine. And finally, Daniel Wagner, who is the CEO of Country Risk Solutions, who joins us from Portland, Oregon. Let's start with you, please, Daniel. I want to go back a couple of days to look at sort of the fallout that we've had from the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump at the White House in the Oval Office. I want to look specifically now at the reaction that we've seen from Europe. We know, of course, there is a deal that's going on between the European nations and the US relating to tariffs. Starmer was in the White House as well. But how important is it that the European nations find a balance between not annoying Trump, but also throwing their support behind Zelenskyy?
Can I just say before I answer that question, about a week ago, I was on this network and I said Zelenskyy didn't have any cards to play and that I felt he would be returning to America with an agreement on minerals. And that's exactly what happened, right? So I also think that what he should have done is he should have gone into the Oval Office, thanked Mr. Trump, the American people, the Congress, praised Mr. Trump for his brilliant diplomacy, and said that he would like to build towers, named Trump Tower, in Kyiv as soon as possible. That would have changed the entire dynamic, and I expect the outcome of the meeting would have been entirely different. Now, in answer to your question, I think the dynamic obviously has shifted. That isn't to say that there is no chance that he will be returning to the Oval Office and that things will not be ironed out at the end of the day, because I think they will be ironed out. But in the absence of that, and until that time comes, there is no alternative except Europe for Mr. Zelenskyy. And we've seen that he's had already a little bit of luck in going and to the UK and getting this 2.3 billion pound package, or it was a loan, I believe, from the Brits. I think there's going to be more from Europe to come. I think they need to circle their wagons. They will. They're coming up with a strategy for an alternative approach to resolving the war. And in due course, I'd have no doubt that there will be additional funds that will be coming.
Marian Duris, I'd like to come to you next. Thank you very much for being here. We know this defence talk, this summit is taking place along with Trudeau and, of course, the European leaders. This show of unity, how far do you think it will go? And I'm also interested in your opinion on the fact that they're looking to discuss potential peace, which is something that Russia and the US have obviously done already, and Russia have been clear in saying that we don't want Europe to be a part of it. So is this a last-ditch attempt, do you think, by the European leaders to be involved, or is this vital in any peace deal that we see moving forward?
I'm not sure if it will be vital for some kind of peace deal in the end. I would say this kind of summit or this kind of meeting is just to make some balance to inactivity or against the activity of Trump administration in case of dealing with Russia about possible ceasefire and other negotiations. I think it's not very okay. Media in the Western Hemisphere they can say and talk much about this meeting, but in the end What I would say, just Giorgio Meloni or a person like Hakan Fidan, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, are the most important one. Other personalities are in not good position, I would say. When we saw Mr. Starmer in White House, when we saw Mr. Macron in White House, every time they was in very, I would say, subordinate position in this case. And I would, as Daniel said, Mr. Zelenskyy has no cards to play with in this case. These leaders like Mr. Macron and Mr. Starmer are not in good position to make some huge or to provide some huge support, even it's in diplomatic way or in arms way or financial way to Ukraine. So I would say it's just a kind of diplomatic pretending of doing something in this case, because the main negotiations which are important already happened in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, already happened in Istanbul between US and Russia. And I think these two countries will be main players in this case. And what will be with Ukraine, what will be with future of Mr. Zelenskyy, we still don't know. But after this Oval Office happening, what was before 2 days, I'm not sure what will happen in this case. So I think US and Russia will be main actors in this process, and not so much European countries under leadership of Mr. Starmer or Mr. Macron.
I'd like to now go to Professor Alexei Haran. Thank you very much for being here. I want to get your opinions on this meeting and what Zelenskyy will be looking for. How do you think he hopes this meeting is going to go, and what does he want to leave it with? I will pose a different question to Daniel Wagner while we get the line sorted there. Daniel, I want to look at the importance of somebody like Giorgio Meloni, who of course we know was at Trump's inauguration. The two have agreed on several things and seem to have some form of relationship there. How important is her attendance, and what do you think she can do potentially to bridge the gap between the European nations, Zelenskyy and Donald Trump?
Her attendance could prove to be really important, actually. The idea being that anyone who has the ear of Mr. Trump is in the potential ability to influence his thinking. I also think that Trump now is thinking that he may have overstepped the bounds and he may have made some mistakes. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some back-channel communication going on now between Trump's folks and Zelensky's folks about how to patch this up. I do think it's an opportunity for Meloni and perhaps other diplomats in Europe to flex their muscles and wield some influence in this process. And I don't doubt that Meloni will actually want to do that. I think it's a golden opportunity for her. And it will be interesting to see if she actually does have a conversation with Trump about this, whether she actually takes credit for it or would like to be seen as a sort of power behind the throne, if you will, maybe among Italians and maybe not so much internationally. We'll see how she plays that card.
Professor Alexei Haran, I'd like to come to you next and look now at what Zelensky's hoping to get out of this meeting. What do you think his aims will be? How do you think he will see this meeting as a success, and what will he take away from it?
Well, I think what both Ukraine and Europe would like to demonstrate during this meeting, first of all, a solidarity of Europe with Ukraine, understanding of Europeans that Ukrainian security is very important for them. So continuing and increasing support from Europe to Ukraine, this is the first point. And I would like to, it was already mentioned that $3 billion loan to Ukraine. This is from the UK. It's very important. But how this money would be returned? It will not be Ukraine which will be returning the loan. It will be paid from the interest on 300 billion Russian frozen assets. in Europe. Again, not from assets directly, but interest. And I think this is very, very important, because on the one hand, Russia is, destroying Ukraine, so there should be something to compensate it, to compensate Ukrainian losses, not only military, but also infrastructure, civilian losses. Well, the second, I think, what Zelensky is expecting, but not only him, is that European leaders may play kind of mediation role with Trump. Yes, it's very unfortunate what happened in the White House. And from what we know, Mr. Starmer have already, after meeting yesterday with Zelensky, he called Mr. Trump, he also called Mr. Macron. Meloni also may play such a role, we'll see. But I disagree here that Macron and Starmer, they showed that they are subordinate to Mr. Trump during their visit to the US. No, I don't think so. I think their position was very dignified by Macron. He contradicted some of Trump's statements, but what is important that both leaders, yes, they know how to deal with Trump, and that it's important to praise him or even flatter him. So they have basic, relations, and I think their role may be very important here. Now, let me come to, well, I would say global and philosophical issues. Both my colleagues said that America and Russia would decide the future, right? If I'm not mistaken, in their negotiation. I think no country wants to come back to the times when two largest powers, superpowers, imperialist powers, when they are dividing the world into spheres of influence. Nobody is interested in that. We are living in a different world, and we do not want to come to colonial empires or even the situation of the Cold War, when where the so-called Brezhnev doctrine, which divided Europe, and well, actually Europe was divided in 1944 into the spheres of influence, and Brezhnev doctrine only confirmed to that Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe is Russian sphere of influence, full stop. And by the way, Mr. Putin would like to return to that. I don't think this is a very good development, and I hope it will not happen. By the way, Europe is saying that they are going to also to present some plan together with Ukraine. We don't know how it will work, but definitely Europe do not want to be excluded from the talks, and I think European position is important. Finally, does Zelensky have cards? Guys, remember how it was predicted that Kiev will fall in 3 days, that Putin will seize Kiev in 3 days. Now it's already the 4th year of the war, and Putin didn't reach his aim to control Ukraine or to crush Ukraine. So the main card is Ukrainian people, Ukrainian people who are fighting for the independence of their country. And if you're talking about the future of Ukraine, Ukraine will remain as an independent country. And this is very important. Russians would not be able, to crush Ukrainian nation. And by the way, they are saying that Ukrainian nation doesn't exist. These are exact quotes from Putin. So I do not exist in his mind, unless I recognize that I am the part of great Russian nation. So this will not happen. So in this sense, I think we fought the freedom, and we will remain free country. That's very, very important. And we will remain a subject, not an object. Regarding the future of Zelensky, it's for Ukrainians to decide what will happen. For the time being, his ratings remain high. But we'll see when the war ends.
I want to build on that. Sorry to interrupt, Professor Harron. I'd like to come now to Daniel Wagner, because we have had Trump allies calling for Zelensky to resign. We had, of course, in the Oval Office, people saying that Zelensky should resign. Daniel Wagner, do you think Trump might see that as a way of getting this deal to move forward quicker as he wants it to?
Well, as we know, he's already offered to resign if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO. That isn't going to happen for some time if it happens at all. That remains to be seen. I think we should keep an open mind about what's going to happen next. And just to correct Alexei, I didn't suggest that the solution to the Ukraine problem should be strictly between the US and Russia. I think that was our other guest. Anyway, I think we have to remember this is in some ways a blank sheet of paper in terms of where we proceed from here. And we could, on one hand, see this bilateral relationship between the US and Ukraine getting patched up and things will work out. On the other hand, it remains frayed and Europe steps up to the plate and there is perhaps an alternative solution. I do not see a solution that strictly involves the US and Russia. I think the only people who see that are Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump. If I was a betting man, I would say it's going to go the way of things getting patched up, Ukraine being brought into the negotiation process, and Europe also continuing to play a role.
Marianne Duras, I'd like to come to you, and I want to get your opinion on what you think Vladimir Putin thinks of these talks that are taking place in London today. Do you think he's worried? Do you think he's concerned? Or does he think that these talks are irrelevant, as he said already, that they won't be part of any ceasefire deal that is made?
I would expect in this way that he does not consider this meeting as a very important, because I would say he sees just the United States in this sense like some counterweight in the discussions or negotiations, because when you hear or listen European leaders or leaders of European Union, so their rhetoric is absolutely different than the rhetoric of new US administration in this sense. US administration says we want peace as soon as possible because this war is tragedy. We don't want any more casualties, any more tragedies, So that's what they are doing with Russia right now. And why I said this thing, why Europe is not so has no so much weight like United States or Russia in this sense is Mr. Starmer has not so stable position inside the United Kingdom. I would expect some snap elections in 2 years. I have some reasons why to expect it. What about Emmanuel Macron? In polls, in first place is Assemblée Nationale, is a party of Marine Le Pen, which can lead the country in next years. You have Mr. Donald Tusk and his government, Mr. Duda, which is president of Poland, and he visited the White House. And there are expected presidential elections. And every candidate says, we want to end or finish this tragic war. And we will not support this war by some sending of so-called peaceful troops to this area. So you have many countries in Europe who says something similar like United States, not so strictly, but after visiting of White House, they are still they trying to adapt the rhetoric of new US administration. And that's again the reason why I said about Giorgio Meloni has very important position in sense of relationship with Donald Trump and his Republican Party, and Turkish minister, because Turkey getting more and more geopolitical weight in the region, and I would say in conflict as well, because we saw negotiations in Istanbul in April 22. It was very important. It was disrupted by certain people, and you saw in Istanbul again some negotiations between US and Russia. So I would say okay, there in some moment there will be included to these negotiations Europe, Ukraine, maybe more countries like powers, maybe China, India, and so on. But in this moment, it's good idea just to keep it in these two powers. So United States, Russia. I think there will be another steps where will be included more and more countries.
Daniel Wagner, I want to look at some comments that Sir Keir Starmer's made relating to Donald Trump, and it seems that he has faith in Trump towards this deal and belief that Trump is going to get the best deal possible also for Ukraine. Do you think that trust is best placed, or again is this just a situation of Starmer looking to keep his relationship with the US and Donald Trump at the best place possible?
I don't think that anyone who truly understands what Mr. Trump is about would suggest that they have supreme faith in his ability alone to get things done the right way, the traditional way, the conventional way, the common sense way. I think what he's doing is very smart. It's the same thing that Japan's leader has done, which is to go into the Oval Office and praise him and preserve the relationship and then get something back in return. I have no doubt that that's what's at stake here. Let's not forget, of course, that the US and the UK has really historically been deemed to be the essential relationship for both countries. I don't think that's changed at all, and I don't think it necessarily matters who is going to be in the White House and who is going to be at number 10 Downing Street. I think that's going to endure. What I would suggest also is that I think Mr. Starmer could be the sort of alternative power behind the throne in the Oval Office, if you will, because having established that relationship with Trump, just like Meloni has, I think they will have oversized influence on his thinking, maybe not his decision-making, but his thinking. And I think that is really important, because if we rely on the people around Trump to influence him in a way that brings him back from the crazy fringe to the common sense center, that's very unlikely to happen. The Oval Office and the administration is really just filled with loyalists and yes people, and that's not going to help us get to where we need to be on this subject or any other.
Professor Alexei Haran, as we bring this conversation towards an end, I want to bring it back towards the people and take it away from the political discussions that are ongoing. We know this war is still raging on, losses on both sides, drone strikes from both sides, but as somebody who is living within one of those countries which is at war, I want to understand a feeling from the people and how the people are feeling about these discussions that are potentially going to play a vital, if not the most important role in the people living in those countries' lives for the foreseeable future.
So the reaction from the people?
Yes, please. Just an understanding of the feeling on the ground in Ukraine at the moment, given these talks are going on, which are going to have such an impact on everyone's life.
Look, basically, I would say that we were optimistic before this meeting. And definitely now what happened, look, on the one hand, I would say, if we are talking about on the one hand, it increased the popularity of Zelenskyy as a person who tried to keep dignity and who rebuffed some of the arguments, well, so-called arguments, which were not correct, basically. But this is understanding of Trump administration. On the other hand, there are critics of President Zelenskyy because we are democracy, so even under martial law, we have possibility to criticize, to disagree with our president very harshly, who thinks that actually Zelenskyy should behave much, in this situation, no, he should behave much more cautious. So this is a debate which is right now, but I don't think that for the time being it influences the public opinion. By the way, there was a public poll right before this meeting in the White House, and most Ukrainians said that no, so they do not agree with the possibility that two countries are deciding without Ukraine what will happen in Ukraine. So this is a basic approach of Ukrainians. A lot will depend definitely on the future development and supply of weapons. That's clear, because as I said, Ukrainian army, Ukrainian people, this is a factor. This is a real factor. But you know, to fight we need weapons, because Russians have, you know, superiority manpower, as they do not care about their soldiers at all. So we need to rebuff it with more sophisticated weapons.
Marianne, to end this discussion, we have a couple of minutes left. Where do you see this meeting going, and how do you think that all of the players in these peace conversations will sort of manage to sit down and get to somewhere where the war might be closer to ending? Who's making the concessions and who's getting what they want?
The European summit, okay, it's a bit different than negotiations or talks between United and Russia. This European summit is trying to make a distinction between this Atlantic mindset, how these negotiations should look like, and this European kind of mindset. We heard about some declarations from Mr. Starmer about we want lasting peace. So he makes some signal or provide some opinion that this kind of Trump's initiative will not be lasting, you know. So I would say they're trying to make their own way how to deal with this conflict. I'm not sure how people or citizens will appreciate this way of thinking, because, you know, by these 3 years, public opinion is changing. It's changed in Poland. What about will to support, if it's by finance, if it's by weapons? There are really significant changes in public opinion. So we will see how governments will react on this fact, if it will be in diplomatic way or how they will react on this citizens' will. Maybe this kind of governing of they will be mirrored or reflected in next elections. So they must be really careful, I would say, what they will declare, what they will promise, and eventually what they will do in this way of maybe some kind of potential finishing of this conflict or potential aid or more aid to this conflict. It's their will or their choice how to go on.
Yes, Marian, thank you very much for joining us. Also, thank you to Professor Harron, and also thank you, Daniel Wagner. We will, of course, bring you the updates as we get them from this meeting taking place in London, future discussions involving the US, Russia, and, of course, everything else from across the world.